in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for coming this evening. While this is a Board of Selectmen meeting and we have a small amount of business that we'll do at the end relative to warrants, etc., the meeting is given over to a workshop format for the purpose of talking about the Complete Streets program. Complete Streets is a statewide initiative, and it fits in with two of our Selectmen goals for the year. One, it has to do with infrastructure, our infrastructure plan that includes roads, and the other has to do with our community involvement commitments to involve the town and the residents of the town in helping us through the workshop format. So the majority of the meeting will be given over to the Complete Streets workshop. Before I start, is there any public comment from the board?
Pancake breakfast tomorrow morning.
And that's at the Senior Center?
Yep.
At what time?
8 to 10.
Thank you. Anything else? Any public comment from the public? Okay, then I'll turn the meeting over to the town manager and we'll get started.
Thank you everyone for coming tonight to discuss Complete Streets and to hear what is Complete Streets all about. So we're looking forward to getting your input. But just to give you a little background on why we're here today, how we got here. Before I came on, the DPW director I know was involved in the discussion with the Selectmen about Complete Streets. And my prior experience, we had adopted a policy in town, and that's the first step of the process, to adopt a Complete Streets policy. So coming on board, we set up a small group of people, including the DPW director, the land use director, the Board of Selectmen chairman, and myself, to discuss a policy, draft a policy, bring it back to the board for adoption, and that was done in April of 2017. And since that point, once you get a approved policy through the state, they rate it. Actually give you a grade, and you have to meet a certain above 80 or above on your policy. And so we were approved with a positive score, and that made us eligible for up to $50,000 in technical assistance. And that's why we were able to hire the consultants that are here tonight from Woodard & Curran. Scott Medeiros, he's Vice President at Woodard & Curran, and Mary McGrann, she's a planner. So they will be walking us through what a Complete Streets is, what it looks like, and examples, and soliciting input on areas in town that you think need more accessibility and safety measures. So, on that point, please take it over.
All right, thanks, Heather. I think we're probably going to start more or less with our slide presentation, so I'm not sure if you want to relocate so you can get that. It's going to be a little awkward in terms of movement, but as Heather said, my name is Scott Medeiros. I'm happy to be here tonight, and Woodard & Curran is happy to help the town of Lunenburg with this process. We have had a meeting already with internal staff, and we're hoping that we can get lots of new and thoughtful ideas from folks that weren't at that meeting, and then maybe folks that were at that meeting that are here tonight that have thought of new things as well. So we did get together and speak with, we spoke with the police chief, with the town manager, with DPW director of planning, the fire chief, and the school superintendent. So that was the primary group, and we did develop a preliminary list of thoughts that they have in terms of Complete Street issues or improvements or beneficial projects. So later on we'll meter some of that out if folks need that to help their thought process, but we're going to hang on to it and hold it a little tight for a while. So what we want to talk about a little bit are what are Complete Streets. Heather just outlined the Complete Streets policy briefly, but we'll talk a little specifically about that. why you're doing the project, the MassDOT program, and then ask for public, specifically for public input, and solicit any questions and provide whatever answers we can to sort of keep the data collection process here moving along. Complete street. So lack of any other, it's a fairly short definition, but it's provide safe and accessible options for all travel modes, so that includes walking, biking, transit, and all other types of vehicles for people of all ages and abilities, so it includes ADA accessibility as part of that. Using these principles to design streets that promote safety, health, economic viability, quality of life within the community, and I think we heard that community involvement in what the chairman said at the beginning of the meeting, provide safer, more accessible, and comfortable means of travel from home, school, work, recreation, retail, and promote the livable community. So I noticed coming into town, obviously at this time of year, it's probably even more pronounced that the large piles of snow, and we were in the middle of the winter season, and what there are for safe routes around town are probably even more encumbered with the weather that we're dealing with. So what is a complete street? Active sidewalks, dedicated bike lanes, active roadway, which involves maybe consideration of queuing lanes or ability to have dedicated turn lanes so that folks can continue to move freely along the street, safe crosswalks, planting strip, green spaces, all those things lend themselves to a more livable type of community. I know personally, I think the first time I ever heard complete streets used as a term, and I think the one thing that the chairman just to divert for a second said was it is a state initiative that we're looking at, but it's a national initiative. So we're seeing this in it's nationwide. Folks are trying to consider all of these techniques to improve their modes of transportation and make things more healthy and accessible. But yeah, so the green, when you first think about it, you think about a street, you think about strictly vehicles, but I think in order to really think about opportunities for projects that would help the community that are complete street projects, you need to think a little bit broader, and so I think that's always a challenge. It's not really just the street, it's off-street, it's pedestrian access, it's ADA, it's some of those other things that, bus stop areas or warning type of signage and those types of things. So.
And Scott, I just wanted to add one thing if I could.
Sure, sorry.
Back to that picture. And actually, we go back to the previous slide.
Sure.
So when we're talking about a complete street, you're seeing a lot of stuff go on in this picture. And I like this picture because it has a lot of the components of a complete street in one image. But a complete street doesn't necessarily mean that you get everything in the kitchen sink with every single street that you think about and talk about in your community. It's a little bit of picking and choosing and prioritizing. Certainly budgets are limited. Certain things are going to make sense on some streets but not on others, and you really need to prioritize. So I like this image because I thought it would be a nice example to illustrate exactly what a complete street is with everything in the kitchen sink. So you see the bus vestibule for waiting for public transit. You see some bike lanes, you see some green space, there's sidewalks, there's some nice very visible crosswalks here with also a median in the middle for pedestrian safety while they're continuing to cross a very wide roadway. You see some nice street lighting, street trees. It just is a very attractive, friendly bike lane over here. Clearly marked speed to reduce vehicular speeds. There's a lot going on here.
Probably speed tables, very
speed, yeah, probably a speed, like a speed hump. We're not saying that Lunenburg is going to need to do a complete street that has every single one of these pieces in it. It's just an image and an example of what a fully functional complete street could look like. But as Scott mentioned, if you click to the other slide, you can break it down into components. So some of your opportunities in Lunenburg may be to focus on sidewalks on some roads. It may be to really focus on crosswalks in some areas. Are there areas where you're deficient in crosswalks?
Or maybe there are crosswalks, but maybe they aren't fully accessible to all age levels or ability levels in your community. Is it easy for someone in a wheelchair to get across the street? Are the ramps correct to get down to that sidewalk and then across the sidewalk, and flashing lights and things like that? So when you're kind of taking in the presentation and thinking about things, don't feel like we're saying, we're going to turn Mass Ave into the previous image that we showed. We're just talking about the different pieces that come to your mind when we're talking about all these components that you think might be a good fit for areas of your community, if that makes sense. Thank you.
And feel free to interrupt if you have thoughts or opinions or anything that we say strikes a chord that you feel like this is not an orchestra, this is meant to be an open but a workshop from our perspective to gather information and feedback and input from the community. So, Mary.
Totally late in that question already. Sorry. So how does this work in terms of Mass Ave being, is that our road, not our road to make changes to? How does that factor into this?
There is a nuance with state roads. So when if there's a state road involved, it's still a community road. The town has it's part of your infrastructure in terms of access from point A to point B. But there's a coordination effort that needs to be had with Mass DOT when something's proposed on a state right away.
So when you say a coordination effort, what exactly does that mean?
Well, so we'll be talking a little bit more specifically.
Factor in as you go along.
Yeah, no, and we're going to talk specifically about types of projects. But the goal here, actually, one of the goals is to try to capture for your community some of the available funding that's been put aside for these projects. So step one was the technical support that we're providing currently. That will yield a plan development, and that plan will be a prioritization plan. So we'll identify projects in town. They may be on Mass Ave. They may be outlying projects in the outer portions of town. Those projects will be on the list, and then ultimately the town decides to do those projects. You can apply for additional funding to support those projects. So if you have a project on Mass Ave and it's a state, it's technically the state would have to facilitate a project being done within the state right away. It would be in conjunction with Mass DOT since it's from a permitting perspective.
And I wouldn't shy away from Mass Ave.
Not at all.
If you feel like there are improvements that could be made to address things like safety and ADA accessibility, etc. I wouldn't shy away from discussing those tonight. I think it's a nice opportunity to get that on the prioritization list and in front of Mass DOT. So that's a great question, but I would say that it's a pretty wide open book tonight, and would like to capture all the kind of thoughts and ideas. And if a lot of it is focused on Mass Ave, then we can kind of talk about that moving forward. I would say.
Yeah, but it's not the same. It's a little more complex than another town road in terms of right-of-way, working the right-of-way.
So you want me to?
Sure, go ahead.
So in terms of, we talked a little bit about, what does a complete street look like? There's street lighting and crosswalks and things like that, but you can also think about it a different way regarding what are typical complete street needs. So instead of thinking about crosswalk lighting, etc., you could think about it in terms of safety. What are some safety features on the roadways in your community that could be improved? So do you have high crash locations in your community that you're aware of, or you've almost gotten, unfortunately, in an accident yourself, or your friend got in an accident, or you're just aware of, a number of crash locations in the community? Would be interested, where are those, and are there improvements, either those intersections or those roadways that we could talk about? Where in your community did cars go way too fast? You're downtown, or you're at your house, or you're in your neighborhood, and you just know the cars are going way too fast. And it's an environment where there might be pedestrians or bikes, and where could we slow things down potentially? As I mentioned earlier, ADA accessibility. So are there folks in wheelchairs, or using walkers, or using other mechanisms to help them get around town, where some improvements could be made to make the roadways and sidewalks a little bit more accessible? Pedestrian safety and mobility. So new crosswalks, improved crosswalks, bigger, better lighting, better markings, sidewalks, and/or paths. And those pedestrian signals that are going to give the pedestrians a little bit more safer opportunity to make crossings where they need to. So are there any of those locations in your community that may need improvement? Bike safety and mobility. So bike lanes, wider shoulders for folks who may be biking in the community, signals for bikers, and then also bike parking. I know that bicycle parking at town buildings is something that may have been discussed in your community in the past. So is that something we want to talk about tonight? Transit operations and access, so enhanced stop amenities, stop consolidation, things like that. I know the bus service is a little bit limited in Lunenburg, but that doesn't mean we should, not discuss that as well. If you think some bus shelters or other type accommodations would make sense in your community, this is a great opportunity to talk about that. And then vehicular and freight operations is something else that can be something to talk about during Complete Streets. So where you have, again, cars, pedestrians, bikes, all these different users, and big trucks, are there those kinds of interactions in your community that we need to think about and maybe take a closer look at how all those pieces are moving. So those are typical Complete Street needs.
And sometimes related to that, you find that, even out of town, there's a business that tends to generate a lot of truck traffic, and a lot of times they route through a section of town where it becomes a problem. Complete Streets policy. So Heather mentioned it in the beginning of the meeting, and we've handed out a copy to all. It was a copy available. If you came into it, everybody should have a copy of that. Did you want to read it?
For folks that may be watching at home, so you can find the Lunenburg Complete Streets policy online, or certainly contact a member of the town staff. But just to read the vision and the purpose, again, it was adopted in April 2017. The vision and the purpose of Lunenburg's Complete Street policy is the following. To accommodate all road users by creating a road network that meets the needs of individuals utilizing a variety of transportation modes. The town of Lunenburg will, to the maximum extent practicable, design, construct, maintain, and operate all streets to provide for comprehensive and integrated street network of facilities that are safe for all users of all ages and abilities, including children, families, older adults, and individuals with disabilities as a matter of routine. This policy directs decision makers to consistently plan, design, and construct streets to accommodate all anticipated users, including but not limited to pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, emergency vehicles, and freight and commercial vehicles. And then the whole policy is about 4 pages, but that's just the vision at the very beginning. And then it goes into some definitions and some scope of applicability and things like that. So this is, again, as Heather suggested earlier, this is kind of where this whole project stems from, is your new policy in place.
And it's a great vision for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we've already we'll move along. I think we've already hit this along the way, but Lunenburg did receive the grant. They didn't receive $50,000. It's a little bit less than that. That's the maximum available. That's the number that's there. But for the technical assistance, and then we came on board and started the process, and then there is future funding available, at least in 1 or 2 remaining fiscal years. And then I think the hope is that the program will be reestablished with subsequent state budgets, and there'll continue to be money available for this program going forward. Here's a sort of a tough-to-see list, and this is also part of your handout, so I always hate to discourage folks to look away from what we're talking about on the screen, but I think it might be easier to read it on paper that you have in front of you. So we wanted to just show you a list of traffic safety, bicycle facilities, pedestrian facilities, and then transit facilities and the types of projects that are fundable, typically in Complete Streets projects. It gives you a sense as to the variability of the types and scale and size of the projects. So not all the projects are million-dollar projects. They're able to be supported with funding at a lower level for smaller projects. So things like pavement markings, and I don't want to read all these, but radar, speed feedback signs. I know the police chief mentioned when we met that there are definitely some spots around town that those would be beneficial to control some of the rate of speed in places. Establishing pedestrian buffer zones, adding new sidewalks, some of the things that would improve wayfinding for pedestrian signage, improve signage, and a number of others, and I won't extend everybody's...
Just to add one thing, this list is from Mass DOT. It's their Fundable list that they put out to participants in the Complete Streets program. So this is Mass DOT's Fundable list. I do want to add that Mass DOT specifically says if you have a project and it doesn't fit a category on this list, it doesn't mean we won't fund it. It just means we'll talk to you in more detail about that project, or we'll need to have some communication about it, and we'll give you our opinion. So if it's something that's your idea and that's not specifically on here, don't worry about it. We'll still take the suggestion, and we'll see what happens.
They put an other at the bottom of every category, so that's their catch-all. I think this is a great graphic because it shows you sort of the gravity of the number of communities that are at least participating in the program within the Commonwealth. The yellow is number of registered communities. It's 180. There are the yellow with the hatching is there's 8 with a letter of intent. 145 with approved policies. Those are the greens. Approved prioritization plan is where we hope to get Lunenburg fairly shortly to add into that list. And there's 90 with approved plans, which is the green with the hatching. And then approved projects with in 2017 and 18, there's 26 and 17, 22 already in 18. So it's a program that is like wildfire in the Commonwealth. Folks want to always take advantage of legislation and available dollars to try to improve their infrastructure and advance in this area. So other communities are doing that, and communities right around you as well.
I just thought you might be curious to see who else is participating in the program in the state.
Not to be redundant, but just to sort of break out a few examples that are just in different words. Improving vehicle safety. We mentioned that in a previous slide. Crash location, safety improvements, pedestrian movement, and I think that's a large piece of the Complete Streets. Is most communities, particularly rural, tend to have limitations on pedestrian access, and I think that facilitating movements from places where people are living or are spending a lot of time, schools and such, and getting to places they want to go, whether it be the library or the park or the ball field or the destinations. Thinking through those kinds of things tend to conjure up in folks' minds, yeah, there's a big gap in that connectivity. I know I walk that way with my kids, and I'm on the edge of the stripe, and I'm fearful that I might get hit or what have you. Bicycle safety, and that's kind of the same sort of issue. Better ADA accessibility, I think that's a challenge for all communities. I think just getting up to speed with ADA, making sure that, I think we overlook areas that are inaccessible at times, and until it becomes a problem, you maybe don't think about it. And then alternate transportation modes, and I know you're a rural community, but there are opportunities for folks, whether it be seniors or others, that have access to some busing to get to places that they otherwise wouldn't necessarily be driving to.
This one just goes into a little bit more detail about how exactly can speed be reduced for cars to accommodate other users like bikes and pedestrians. So what are some of the tools and techniques that can be used to actually bring those vehicle speeds down? Certainly, the radar sign that detects how fast you're going, and you see it and you go, oh boy, I should really slow down. That's one of them. But this is just a couple quick examples. Curb extensions and bump outs. Usually, you're driving down the road and you see it gets really narrow here, so you want to slow down a little bit. Improve signal progression, so signal timing can kind of keep vehicles at a more moderate speed if things are timed right. Center medians, you saw that in one of the images I shared, so that if you have a wide roadway, pedestrians can go across one piece and then wait a minute and make sure there's no cars coming and then another piece. And usually those center medians, when vehicles see those, they tend to slow down as well. A more narrow travel lane width. Streets with on-street parking tend to slow folks down as well because they don't want to hit some of the cars that might be parked or parallel parking or pulling out, things like that. And then again, the raised sidewalks or the speed tables. So these are all just ways that are good techniques to reduce speeding vehicles going on different roadways.
And these are sort of general techniques, because I know Jack's probably cringing. No one likes speed bumps or speed tables when you have to remove the white stuff that we're all dealing with out there during this period of this season. So that can be a challenge. And I know in New England, the bump outs can be a challenge. You set your plow and you start going. At this time of year, all those things can become difficult to navigate and deal with. But they're all components of improving the pedestrian interaction with traffic and vehicle speeds.
And these are just a couple, we're nearing the end of the presentation, but just a couple before and after pictures that I thought might be helpful as well.
Towards the direction of the statue.
At the beginning, I noted earlier that picture that had like all the techniques and kitchen sink and all one picture. So I thought it might be helpful to show just a couple pictures of complete street projects throughout the Commonwealth. That it's not everything, it's just a couple pieces to try to improve the performance of a roadway for different users. So this is in Cambridge, it's Anderson Bridge. This is the before picture. So you can see it's just basically a big, huge, wide roadway with limited kind of pedestrian amenities. And in this case, it's still a big, huge, wide roadway, but there's very clearly marked travel lanes and turning lanes, and then bike lanes on each side, which I think is nice because a lot of bikes use this roadway. So that's just one of the key differences. It's just simple pavement markings. And so this probably was not a very expensive complete streets project. Probably a few $1,000s maybe, depending on how long. Maybe
Just restriping mostly.
Just restriping. So that's
can you pick that up can you get that for home folks? Okay.
That's a simple project. As an example, the next one is, this is in Arlington, Massachusetts, again, suburb of Boston. This is the existing condition, and this is the proposed completed condition where you can see just the on-street parking, and really only designed for vehicle uses. In this case, again, you still have the on-street parking, but you have the more clearly defined travel lanes with the striping, and then a very clearly marked bike lane. Oh, sorry, did you have a question? No? Oh, sorry.
It's well timed with the guy opening the door, the guy on the bike.
Right.
He's in a bit of a precarious spot. Right? The car's coming and the guy's opening the door, so I'm not sure how we took that photo about 30 seconds later.
All these lanes work with like 18-wheelers and large construction equipment, making wide turns in this.
Well, I think
lanes is like 5. There's bikes.
That's a great question. I think that no matter what, we're not suggesting designing unsafe roads. I think that when you look at doing a complete street, either a new street that is sort of following principles of complete streets, or a renovation of a street, typically you're constrained by your right-of-way. So I think what we're going to find as we start delving into, hey, I think there's an issue here, or what can we do with this road, or what elements can we implement on a road, you're going to find that you're constrained by the right-of-way. No one here is interested, and I'm sure the town board of selectmen is not interested in taking anybody's property in most cases to do any kind of an expansion of it. So it's sort of you have a box, you're working within the box, and within reason you try to find the best fit. You still need to accommodate the vehicles you expect to be on the roadway. So if you have a radius, you might be able to slow down velocity of travel and slow down the speed of traffic, but you still need to be cognizant of the need for turning radii for large vehicles, for tractor trailers and those kind of things. Unless you're prohibiting those vehicles from being on the road, you don't want to create an unsafe situation for what we're trying to do ultimately is create a much more safe interaction opportunity for vehicles and pedestrians, or eliminate the interaction possibilities completely between those two groups by giving amenities to one end or the other to improve the situation. Is that sort of the answer? Yeah. I think still first and foremost is safe transportation for everybody.
And I think there's one more example. This is in Dennis, Massachusetts. Again, this is a very simple example. The difference is very subtle. So this is an existing condition. This is a complete street project, and all that was done was that a sidewalk was added here, and then a green planting strip to provide a little bit more of a shoulder and a buffer for folks who may be walking down towards this part of town. So again, it's not, it's a big, huge, everything in the kitchen sink project. It's a very subtle project, but that provides another access point for a different type of user, bicycle, maybe even a bicycle, but pedestrians, and gives you a little bit more of a buffer between a busier roadway and where you might be headed on foot. So that's another example. That is a complete streets project as well.
Yeah, and I think it's also, this is sort of poignant because it's very simple and it's very rural, and so the other two we showed you were more urban and some of the challenges down in the downtown area. This is a little more indicative of some of the things you might run into on the outskirts of Lunenburg, where you have connectivity issues. So folks come in and build a subdivision over here, and all of a sudden a bunch of kids live there, and they have a sidewalk internally, but now the kids want to go down to the park, and so there just never was sidewalk connectivity there. So I think a lot of times you find what these complete streets projects end up being in a rural sort of community is creating some connectivity where folks want to go from where they are. And that's just more indicative. You get downtown and it maybe gets a little bit more complex once you get into the Mass Aves, and you start to look at some of those more complex transportation networks. But by and large, you're filling in gaps a lot of times, and that's very typical of a rural community and a project that would come of it.
So Scott and I have some questions for you. So we're ready to head into the interactive part of the workshop tonight. Again, the goal of the workshop is to listen and learn from you and also from folks at home regarding your thoughts and ideas for complete street projects. And to folks in the room and also folks who may be watching at home, I would say if you have an idea that you didn't want to share tonight or that you think of it later when you get home, Scott and I have our contact information at the end, but you could also certainly reach out to Heather or Adam or certainly Jack. So folks at home, I'm sure you know how to reach your municipal staff, but just as a suggestion, I know if you have some ideas, we want to hear from you as well. So kind of some lead-in questions that we have for you to hopefully spur the discussion. I'll be happy to put some notes up here on the board. I do have some paper maps as well, if that's more helpful for someone to look at a paper map. But otherwise, Scott was going to pull up either Google or Bing. And if you have an idea for a project or a roadway, Jack's idea is very helpful. Was to pull it right up on Google, and we'll do an aerial view so we can get a better look at what you're talking about, so we have a really good understanding. You can describe the location or the need for a sidewalk or something a little bit better. So that's how we're hoping to interact. Yes, sir.
Can we go back a little bit and can you explain in greater detail about funding? Because I'm not convinced that the $50,000 that was mentioned is nearly enough for anything in this realm, except maybe planning. Are we to believe that the Department of Transportation is going to fund all of this and Lunenburg won't have to ante up any money?
Not at all.
Great question.
No, that's a great question. So to be more specific, the $50,000 cap is really to develop the prioritization plan. So you have projects that you identify as qualifying projects that the community would like to investigate the possibility of doing, essentially. Those projects will be on a list, and then if the town decides they'd like to pursue one of those projects, you have the ability to apply for up to $400,000 in contributory funds from MassDOT for a project. So if you have a $700,000 project or $1 million project that the town is contemplating doing, there is eligible funding if it's on the complete street prioritization list. So at the moment, that makes that money available.
Is it like matching grants? I mean, you have to put up at least half?
That's a great. It's up to $400,000 toward an eligible project. So I don't believe that. I'm not 100% certain if they'll give you $400,000 to do it or $380,000 straight up to do the project without any input. By and large, these projects are being incorporated into some rehabilitation projects. So I can tell you that the way we've sort of looked at it is we've analyzed. Well, this is part of our data gathering. But the way you have an infrastructure improvement program in town that's covered by probably a series of available funds or made available funds, whether it be through an infrastructure bonding process that the community go through, but typically the Chapter 90 funds that are allocated to the town annually for road maintenance and improvement of infrastructure. So you have a capital plan that's sort of on the books. So improving to achieve your goals along the lines of your policy that we read a little while ago, and folding in elements of complete streets to those projects that are already on the books and eligible and ready for you to expend your either tax dollars and or Chapter 90 funds is a way to supplement that, and then perhaps get more projects done with the money that you've budgeted internally and supplement it with that additional money that's coming from the state. So
I'd just like to follow up and just tell you that from my perspective, the Chapter 90 funds that we get are woefully inadequate.
Absolutely agree.
Woefully inadequate. So to look to that, I think, is crazy. Okay, and this to me is a great project if you have the money. And we, like any other of the 351 cities and town in Massachusetts, are trying to make do. So I want to make sure that we understand what kind of ante we will have to come up with before we start doing, potential projects and pie in the sky, because it could be that there's no money to do them. And I don't want to get everybody's, expectations up high. Thank you.
In addition, I believe, I serve currently on the Montezut Planning Organization doing the TIP for the region. And there have been several projects on federal aid eligible roadways where improvements are proposed to make the roadway a complete street. So I believe that's another opportunity through the TIP, is if we identify projects on any of the numerous federal aid eligible roadways, that we can seek funding through that process as well.
Right, and this is our process, and what we're looking at the complete streets policy specifically. There are other funding opportunities for sure. The TIP is definitely an option, and one that's used on state roadways. I know a number of communities in their downtown improvements are chasing that TIP money.
Right, I believe we have, and Jeff, you might know better, but I think it's either 25 or 26 federal aid eligible roadways that, if those are identified, and I don't know whether they will be, but if they are, certainly we need to cross-reference those with the TIP, because we actually will have funding available in the next 2 years that we're going to be looking for projects to fit in. So.
Right.
Scott, let me tell you, maybe this might help you out with this. Some of this could follow and be joined together with the pavement management plan. Next year, next construction season, we expect to pave off of 2A, White Street to the town line, and all those side streets, Maple Parkway and Pearlbrook Road. When that project was built in the 70s, I believe, late 60s, early 70s, there was a sidewalk built into that project. It's, for the most part, non-existent right now. When Scott says a project of $400,000 or $380,000, it may behoove us as a community to do smaller projects tied into things that we're already going to do that already have an identified source of funding. Now, we have money in the debt exclusion, Chapter 90 pavement management plan to pave those roads. For instance, other roads, yes, but those roads specifically. We could then apply through this process to rehab, redo those sidewalks all through that neighborhood with the appropriate ramps and the pitch and everything, and a grassy strip. And if we were to get the funding, or we were successful in the grant, it wouldn't cost the town anything. And it's tied into the pavement. And of course, you've got Pearlbrook across the street, older folks. They could have access in a crosswalk to get to that, and they could just meander through that, through those side streets to get exercise. Another small project might be Reservoir Road. Now, we just paved Reservoir Road through those same funding sources that I just mentioned. I didn't stripe it on purpose because I knew this was coming. Now, everybody knows that's an exceptionally wide street. Already been paved, already been paid for, has not been striped yet. There's a blank canvas where we could do the striping and identify one side or the other, or both, as a share the road concept. Whereas people could, a lot of people use that for exercise, and, we could stripe and put the appropriate decals and the appropriate signage all the way up and down Reservoir Road. Smaller numbers, certainly than 400,000, doable numbers, and it wouldn't cost the town anything. So we're not signing up in that case for matching, or this, give us this, we'll give you that kind of funding. So from my perspective anyway, that's the kind of marriage I would like to see Complete Streets become. And there's a ton more. I'll just mention one more because it was the most popular one. At the previous meeting, superintendent was there. The Oak Ave sidewalks that originates at Turkey Hill School. It's on the opposite side, but it continues up to Main Street, disappears at the crosswalks to that grassy island where the tree is, and then reappears Main Street and goes down Main Street. A small doable project would be to reconfigure that grassy island, put a raised sidewalk so that kids from Turkey Hill Middle School could conceivably go from the school, crossing the street with the guard, all the way up a sidewalk, crosswalk, sidewalk, crosswalk, sidewalk, all the way into the center of town, crosswalk to the teen center.
That's fine. Maybe I'm just too sensitive to funding availability, but what you just said is...
Well, I can't speak, I don't make that decision. It's unlikely we're going to use the Chapter 90 money this is an application, it's a marriage, it's intertwined. We already have a plan, or we will develop a plan in certain parts of town, following the pavement management plan, for instance, where this will add to it in small doses here and there throughout the town.
Thank you.
There's an area, it's not really like a place where people are going to travel maybe to or from, but we have a town beach that's always made me really uncomfortable in terms of the parking and the warning signage, because there isn't any. And I think some of the things we talked about may not be something that's going to be this destination by biker walking, but the specific area could really probably be improved with better lineage for the parallel off-street parking. And then you whip around this corner on Prospect Street and there's no slow down town beach. So we all get nervous there, and so I feel like a lot of these concepts could be applied to that little area and really improve the safety.
Okay, great.
That area itself, there's disconnects in that area. Someone can walk down along the waterfront and cross over into Emerald Place on that grassy strip where a little sign denotes pedestrian way. That could conceivably be a sidewalk project, which would inevitably, well, not inevitably, but could bring you to Fitchburg. You could walk from Leominster down that sidewalk. You could put a sidewalk to the beach. You could put a sidewalk along that grassy strip along Emerald Place. Jump over, there's a sidewalk already on Wheelam Road that brings you down to Electric Ave. The project on Summer Street is going to have sidewalks on both sides, and that would bring you right into Fitchburg. So I think when you start thinking connectivity, connecting the dots is one way you can look at, bringing things together for small amounts of money, little projects.
And that's a great one. We heard sort of resoundingly from our meeting that we had, with staff as well, and that's perfect. There are issues there. There are issues at the roundabout and the ability to get from one side to the other, and that's an area where there's a high density of folks living in that area, and then there are additional development occurring in that area as well. So you start thinking about where are people. And that sort of leads you to...
And you talked about where you've seen accidents twice when I've been sitting there for swimming lessons, somebody has run into a car that's parked. Meanwhile, all the kids are in and out. So, I mean, I don't know how often I'm there, but twice I've seen a car get swiped by another car.
Yes.
So it definitely, I think, does have true danger.
Great.
Thank you.
That's a great start.
Chase Road, the speeding on Chase Road, it's just a long straightaway. There's a lot of accidents there.
Just people getting too much speed.
There's a couple crossover streets, West Townsend Road, Northfield.
Highland.
I don't know what you can do on a straight road, but more signage.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that is a problem that folks run into, is that they have the straight roads are too straight.
Scott, can you get off the Google Maps?
Sure.
One of the things you're not going to see in Google Maps is elevation. So basically anywhere there's a hill, right? Going up the hill, people gain speed trying to get up the hill. Going down the hill, I mean, and there's a lot of hills here in town.
One place to control speed could be on Lancaster Avenue, Goodrich. We were finally successful, Jim and I, in getting the lady to allow us to trim her shrubs, take them out and put a wooden guardrail, which enhanced the sight line. We could put some sort of a flasher, a beacon, something, with a flasher approaching it. You can't sit in the car and make people slow down. But these things, these methods are out there. Flasher at the intersection, and one of those very popular now are those signs, the diagonal signs that show you your speed, say, geez, nice job, or slow down.
Like in Bolton and Lancaster. Scott and Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the safety things that can be incorporated into this is geometry improvements at intersections,
Correct.
which I think that, I know we identified a few when we spoke, and I think that there's probably others that people have some concerns about. And what the geometry is you've all driven on the wonky intersections we have where the road has a delta island where it splits you in either direction depending which way you want to go, or it comes in at a non-90 degree angle. So all of those things fall into safety improvement, and I think that we identified at least 3 where we have the delta islands that are problematic, and there's a number of other ones where the road comes in at an acute angle and might work great going in one direction, but gives you sight distance issues or radius issues going in the opposite direction. So that's just something else that I think it's harder to wrap your head around in the Complete Streets program.
It totally is, which is why we say, even when you leave and think about it a little bit more, we're going to have a survey and some other ways for folks to give us, we should have set up like a Twitter feed and folks could have sent questions in there. It could have been really super high tech, but definitely those are, and I'm trying not to sort of throw all those out, but before we're done here, we're going to let you know what the staff thought, and maybe everyone nods their heads and says, those are all problematic areas where we really need to make some improvements over time to try to save on problems. I know that the police chief had his favorites, and I know Jack had his favorites, and everybody, and there was a lot of consistency in that conversation. So I'm not sure whether or not we can. Is this the area that you were talking about, or is it further down by?
I'd ask the chief. He probably knows where the most accidents are.
What intersection with Chase were you saying?
Road.
Yeah, further down.
South.
You're into Townsend now.
Yeah, the green line there.
Right down here, Northfield. Right. So I think, can we get?
That's number 1.
Chase Road.
That's Holman Street.
That's home.
We're on Holmes, and so yeah, but you can kind of get the idea as to. Let's see if I can figure out how to get back there. I don't want to be clunky about it, but Holmes, did it skip on me?
Right there.
Right there. Why is it going back? Maybe that's the only place where they have it. My guess is that's the only place where they have it on Chase Road. But we have a note. We'll take a look at Chase Road, put it on the list for sure. Do you have any input on Chase Road or experience with Chase Road?
Yeah, can I just speak to this issue? I have a question first, and then I want to make a comment about what's already been talked about. I kind of feel that we haven't brought a lot of clarity to the funding issue. My question is, projects that were already identified that are on the tip, will any funding that we receive through this initiative supplant that funding?
Only if you have a TIP-funded project, and it also is a complete streets project, and you apply for some of that funding, and I'm not 100% sure that it replaces any of that funding. It can be added to that funding on that project to allow you to do more on that project. Or you could not apply for it for the TIP-funded project and utilize it, as Jack said, to supplement some work you're doing on a Chapter 90 or a bond-related funded project that the town's already established that they're going to do.
Okay. My comment would be, and I think Jack and Adam already alluded to some of the problems that we've already identified. Gentlemen here brought the subject of Chase Road up, the intersection of Chase Road and Northfield Road, which will probably be addressed within the next several months on another project that we're working on. However, the point I'm trying to make is we've identified intersections that eventually are going to have to be redesigned. We've identified other areas in town where speed mitigation is going to have to become. There's going to have to be an effort made to improve roads with respect to speed. However, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think what people don't understand is this initiative is just identifying funding. We will have to address these problems anyway. At least with this initiative, we'll have a funding source to look towards to try to help us to do what we were going to do anyway. So the management of the town are constantly trying to identify funding sources, and that's all this is. This isn't a commitment right now. Am I wrong?
Absolutely correct.
You're correct.
So we're not committing the public to some huge amount of money.
Not at all.
Well, if we did nothing, the public would have to pay the entire bill. This will help supplement what we already decided were issues that are eventually going to have to be addressed.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Yep.
Is that a little more clear?
Well, yeah, it is, Jimmy, and I don't want anybody to get the impression that I'm against this, because I'm not. But knowing what I know, and maybe I don't know all that there is to know about funding in the town of Lunenburg, I'd like to know where the money is going to come from for this kind of thing. That's all.
Right, and obviously that wasn't the intent of this comment. I know you're not against it. I just want everybody to understand that without this, we have to pay the whole bill. This is just a funding source that the town's identified.
How is it that we have to pay the whole bill?
Well, we've already identified projects that eventually will have to be done. I'm not saying that means they're going to be done tomorrow.
Yeah.
But we've looked at intersections and roadways that have to be improved, probably way beyond my tenure. But eventually it's going to have to be. And so the town's looking at it as though, okay, yeah, that has to be done, but where can we get other funding sources that help us
Sure, makes sense.
pay for this stuff that has to be done?
And in order to be eligible for the Mass DOT Complete Streets program, they will not consider anything from a community. Even if you have a Complete Streets policy, they will not consider you for DOT funding unless you have a prioritization plan. So the projects that we're talking about tonight and the projects that we've discussed with town staff previously are all projects that are going to be on one big pile for the prioritization plan. And then we'll all have another conversation and work together. As Scott said, there'll be a public survey to get feedback on how should we prioritize these projects for when and if Lunenburg would like to move forward and request funding from DOT to do some of these projects. We have our policy. We did the prioritization plan. Here it is. We'd like to do this project. We've already thought about it. We've already discussed it with our community. We have all our ducks in a row. We're eligible for your program. And it just makes it easier for the town to receive funding to access the funding. And you cannot, this is not a funding source for the community unless you have a policy and unless you have a prioritization plan.
And if we came up with a $2.5 million project that covered 6 miles of road, we in theory could put that in the prioritization plan and apply for funding segmented into smaller projects throughout that larger project, correct?
Certainly.
Yeah, I think we would actually break it into sections, so it wasn't, because that big project would actually expose you to, that's the project you want to do.
Sure.
But we would say that's
as
what
we
we
have
want,
this discussion,
let's put it into digestible parts.
Yes.
If that makes sense. Right.
That was my question. Is it a one-time 400,000? Or what is the limit on the funding? And do you submit one application that has multitudes of projects, or is it an annual, or what is the funding?
Right now, it's up to 400,000 in the annual program.
So it's annual?
It's annual.
Well, if it keeps getting funded.
If it continues to get funded, so it could go away in 2 years.
Right, yeah, it could go away.
And in theory, what you've done is you've taken and looked at your town, you've looked at complete streets related elements in your capital, and as was just stated by the chief, these are by and large projects that the town intends to do at some point in time. You're not locked into any time frame. You can look for other funding sources, but you've accepted as a community that you want to follow the principles that you've laid out in your policy. And so your design of those are going to incorporate some of these elements into those. And so that's guiding you in terms of why you're moving forward. The funding is kind of the carrot to get you to sort of move in that direction. Right? So the funding is available. If it becomes unavailable, you're still going to do the project. So.
And there is the tip.
And there are other funding sources.
There are many projects in the TIP, and at the last meeting that I was at, they're really advocating communities to come up with a short list of smaller projects to plug into holes that we have.
And most of the time, those TIPs end up being fairly large, complex.
Well, the Summer Street project,
downtown Main Street redevelopment, right? Yeah. And those get pretty complex, and the question about right-of-way width tends to become a major sticking point with those, because you have businesses and you start losing parking. I mean, there's an argument based on that kind of thing. So those aren't always super simple, nor are any of the projects we're talking about. But
there are a lot of super simple projects in our TIP
over the last few
years.
Yeah. And I think that's a great example by the lake, by the town beach, and a number of others. And we're gonna uncork that list soon, I think, but a little bit, and give you some thoughts of some other locations that we've heard. And maybe, we actually have a slide that has a number of them on it. Do you want to?
I should bring that up, yeah.
No?
Yes. So, the baseball fields, there's a walkway from Turkey Hill Road, or Oak Ave to Chestnut Street, Highland. The sidewalk is completely depleted. It's all potholes.
Can you say those street names one more time for me, please?
From Oak Ave to Chestnut Street.
Thank you.
On Highland.
Thank you. And you're going to describe, is that sidewalk in bad condition?
A very bad condition. It's basically the same as the roadway, but it's clearly supposed to be a sidewalk. So it's when the baseball team walks to the park, there's no easy way for them to do so.
Okay, Highland.
Yeah, so right by the pond, that little dash.
Down here?
North.
Here.
Like,
Your first arrow was
first arrow.
better.
There's a pond Yeah, right that strip.
Yeah. And then are you walking from school?
Yeah, I walk from this building.
You walk from school to the baseball field?
Yeah. Well, my house, but it's right by there.
So this is
Okay.
the school?
Yeah.
So coming
Right
down
here.
Oak Ave, going to the triangle at Highland, and then down the street to Chestnut.
Okay.
And I would add that triangle has no pedestrian way at all. So you go from sidewalk to a triangle, grassy area, to the sidewalk on the other side.
Yeah, that's the area.
The triangle has no
There's no
sidewalk.
pedestrian.
It's the same thing as written on Oak Ave sidewalk
Okay.
above.
Connected.
Okay.
And is there a sidewalk on Chestnut?
No.
This is your, right? Just the...
No.
That's Turkey Hill.
That's Turkey Hill Northfield. Or, yeah.
Oak Ave and North.
Oak Ave Northfield.
You're at the other, you need to be at the other end of Oak Ave.
All right, so this thing doesn't work. That's This thing is completely
We'll just
useless.
stick with this.
Yeah, we're in the right spot over here, but it keeps
Yeah.
skipping back to Oak Ave just because
Okay,
that's where I
so
go.
this doesn't have a sidewalk.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the whole thing or just Chestnut to the ball field?
Whole thing.
And do people use the whole thing? Or is this the big destination?
That's usually a big destination for people.
And that's the high school, that's the...
High school,
The high school ball
adult
field.
leagues, yeah.
Thank you.
Nice to hear somebody else talk about Highland Street.
So you go like this. Like you go like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Like that, okay.
So I'll bring up a road that was mentioned earlier. So I live at the top of Lancaster Ave and commute to Route 2. And the speed on Lancaster Ave is exceptionally high. To be honest, I've lived there for about 2 years. I do know this, I say this somewhat facetiously, but the speed limit really isn't posted on the road, so even speed limit signs, something as simple as that, not to say simple, I shouldn't say that, but to slow the traffic down, one, and then additionally, the sidewalk to get to the center of town ends at Rolling Acres. There's Clark's Hill, which is an environmental walkthrough, conveniently passes my house, which I would like access to the center of town. But the sidewalk to extend down there may promote more travel throughout town and to other areas of town.
Well, I think that's an important point. Some of those recreational areas within town, you have a number of those, and you also have some bike trails that come through, so maybe some of the thought process around where do you go when at certain points the bike trail ends at a street or the bike trail ends, or some of those walking areas or recreational areas aren't really allowing you to get anywhere at a certain point. So connectivity of those areas too is certainly helpful.
Because Clark still doesn't have but one parking
One parking spot, yeah.
So if I wanted to go there and I couldn't walk, I could
Correct.
bank on one parking spot.
You better be the first one there.
Yeah.
So the sidewalk was from, you said that there's a sidewalk and it ends at Rolling Acres, so extend the sidewalk on Lancaster to the center of town.
To Clark's. So it comes from the center of town to Rolling Acres, and then it ends there, and then Clark's Hill is just further down Lancaster Ave.
Oh, sorry.
So essentially, Page Street.
Page Street, sure, yes.
Near Page Street, got it.
2 Page Street.
It's good news, Mary. You're running out of room a little bit.
Well, can I read anything that I write?
I'll continue with just one more. That's bad. So on Lancaster Ave, when we come to the center of town to Mass Ave, I drive that a lot, obviously. People make 2 lanes. I think you're supposed to make 2 lanes. I'm not sure, but I've never been pulled over for making 2 lanes, but it's not clearly marked. So just to know what is correct action there.
Because it seems wide enough for 2.
Yeah, I think so.
But there's nothing marked.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, so that's Page Road where you're at.
Yep.
So if you scroll the other way, Clark's Hill is
From the
roughly
through the
there.
town center. Yeah.
Rolling Acres is the development off to your right, slightly to your right. So that's where the sidewalk ends. The hill is just down, not that much further than that to continue the sidewalk.
And where does it come?
So it comes into Mass Ave right at the major intersection, just here. Yep. and there's only one lane marked, I believe I'm correct, but people make 2 lanes, 1 lane to go straight and 1 lane to go left, basically. Forward, yes.
Yeah.
Chief, what's it supposed to be?
Yeah,
Is it 1 or 2? Is it 1 or 2 in your book? On Lancaster.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
So the intersection in the center of town, if you're on Lancaster pulling into the center of town where people make 2 lanes, is it 1? It's supposed to be 1?
Yeah, if you turn it around, that's good.
That's to you.
I was asking boss.
That one right there,
Yeah,
that, where
that's it.
that truck is.
That's left, 1 lane straight, but the state apparently doesn't agree with me, and they have control over that intersection because it intersects with Route 2A. But common sense will tell you the right lane goes straight, the left lane goes
Did I
left.
finally find the right spot?
And you make 2 lanes?
So in that example, it's 1 lane.
lanes there.
When the truck's not there, it's
When the truck's not there, when there's 2 cars there, it's 2 lanes?
That's great.
Huh.
It looks reasonably narrow to be 2 lanes. It must be small cars.
It's wider than it looks in the picture.
Huh?
You actually can't fit a truck in a car, it's wider than it looks. It's a big source of frustration with a lot of residents, but unfortunately I can't get the state so far
To do anything about it.
Okay.
Was that a state road?
Yes.
State's in control of any roads that intersect with a state road.
Okay.
Because the right-of-way of Mass Ave comes over probably outside of that intersection. That's an interface with the state roadway.
You can stay in that area. You're at the Ritter Building, which is right where you're standing pretty much. You can't cross over to the town hall that easily. It's not like,
Yeah.
I did it one night and it was confusing, and you get to like the Green Island and then you're...
Over this way?
Yeah.
Once you get across
You can't really make it across. And if
You
you
have to cut through it,
went
though,
through the
right?
other side, you're in front of the church, there's no sidewalk. You essentially can't cross the center of town as a pedestrian
Yeah.
on a sidewalk.
Easily.
Yeah, that crosswalk.
And we're about to get run over.
Yeah, no.
So yeah, so there wasn't parking at the Ritter one night, so I parked over by the town hall, and I was like, oh, just cross over. I'd never done it, and you can't.
Yeah.
The sidewalk really should continue.
Well, and you can see
Through the common.
So with
Right,
snow there
nothing-
right now,
nothing
probably not
happens.
even really...
like here. So you go here and then you get over here and they go, what now, right?
Yeah, you're in a garden, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So you can't get down to town hall, and if you cross the street on the crosswalk, all you can do is come back across the street or go down to the high school or... Yeah, and I think, and those are some of the little nuances that folks recognize and you run into, and that's the only way that we, there's so many of those little things probably that are out there, and so trying to identify them is critical. And I think to your point, those are some of the things that maybe are solvable at a reasonable cost and can get support from this program to resolve. And they probably make a big difference in people's lives, except you don't think about it.
And I'll do one more, and that'll be my last one. We have a lower common with a gazebo, and I spent an entire day there. There was a historical society field trip, and so throughout the whole time, groups of 3rd graders would come and go, and there's 0 crosswalks to our lower common. So I would like
Just right
get
behind
behind
it.
and
Yeah.
If you flip the camera around, it looks
Yeah, 180 degrees.
So I'm going to spin around and go down the road
Yeah.
here.
now,
Yep.
our
Straight
band
down.
concerts and whatnot, and there's no crosswalk to it.
You're almost there.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Can't miss it.
So they would just drop them off, like kind of pull over the
Well,
buses?
there's just no way to
No,
do it
it's
at
a
the
walking field
pedestrian.
trip, there's no bus.
Oh, walking
Oh,
field
right,
trip.
walking field trip.
But still, there was nowhere. So
It was dicey.
Yeah,
where were they, was there a sidewalk there? or
Right
walking
there.
There's a
down?
sidewalk down Leominster.
Yeah, so it's not just the field trip, but there's no crosswalk.
Yeah, free lighting, there's
That's a
nothing,
lot wider than
concerts.
it looks on that view.
Yeah.
Yeah, really dump trucks. So here's a gazebo here. I don't know where this sidewalk is. Where this is.
It's on Lancaster and on Leominster.
To see where there could be one there.
So if you were to go
Yeah.
satellite view of that, I heard somebody in one of the previous meetings suggest maybe closing Leominster Road along that gazebo. So
That triangle right there.
that triangle right there. So I thought, first knee-jerk reaction was, that's stupid, everyone's going to hate that. But then I actually started driving as if almost the road doesn't exist right there. And it's become second nature to me, and it doesn't bother me anymore at all. So.
Because coming out of
It would
Leominster,
It would make the common more usable. You could connect to the Ritter.
It would feel
much bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what we do for tree lighting.
Tree lighting and concerts
But
too.
if we just close it permanently, I mean, I think. Yeah.
Right. Dig up the road.
Yeah, the feedback I heard when I mentioned that to a couple people was that the people on Whiting would hate it. Now, I'm not saying I agree, and when I go, I actually make the left onto Lancaster. I don't take Whiting, because I don't like coming out of Whiting onto 2A anyway.
Yeah, I don't think most people would do that.
But that's the feedback I heard, is that people would use Whiting as a speedway.
But I don't know how that affects, because they can't come at it from Mass Ave, so the only way is to go through, and they're going to do that now if they want to avoid the center of town. So I don't see a lot of difference whether you go...
I'm just sharing what I heard.
I mean, I never get on Whiting.
Well, I do.
Well, I think that what you'd find in a situation like that is people adapt pretty regularly to those kind of changes, and it's a big hullabaloo to begin with, and then all of a sudden people get comfortable with it, and it's just what they do. I haven't looked at that specifically, so I don't know if doesn't appear there's any driveway access off of it to any properties there, so I don't know.
Either end there is, but there's a big piece in the middle without it.
Yeah, and I mean, that can become a sticking point if folks have the ability to have frontage on a roadway, and all of a sudden that roadway is not a public roadway anymore, then, that's always something that can be a challenge for folks.
When there is an event at the gazebo, they close that section of the road because for safety. But it's still a dangerous area to get to and from, especially when our tree lighting is there. You're bringing small children, it's a tough intersection.
But in general, that would it'd make the gazebo a quieter area, a defensible space. People would be more apt to use it.
Right.
And it's one of those things that doesn't cost any money, really, to close the road. I mean, to do it permanently and nicely, a little bit of money, but...
Right.
Not break the bank.
And you could just try it, just block it off.
Yeah.
Tonight?
Yeah, that's one of those ones that it's pretty easy with some Jersey barrier and some signage and some notices to just and see how people adapt to it. See if everybody shows up at the Board of Selectmen meeting. You'd hear about it or you wouldn't.
Don't forget, you're being recorded,
Another maybe cost-effective one for me would be restriping Main Street to make the parking more obvious and permanent and reduce the width of the road, because there's no real striping on it now and it feels open and people travel faster on it than they should.
Just in general through here or in any...
No, not Mass Ave, Main Street, so to the north of that.
Oh, okay.
Just from the center to that Y intersection we were talking about earlier. The road's plenty wide. There is parking there now.
Down all the way to Oak or...
Yeah.
So, right here, you're on.
Yeah.
Just down to Memorial Drive. This is where the teen center is. This is the senior center, teen center.
Right. So restripe it from where to where?
From Memorial Drive to Oak on Main Street.
From Memorial Drive.
Because people park on one side of the road all the time.
And there's enough room to park, but if it were...
you can park people on both sides of that road.
But if it were more formalized, people would recognize it and they wouldn't go, oh, well, that's not parking.
And they would,
then you wouldn't have 2 lanes when you get out.
The other thing with that is people will park too close to there's a crosswalk, the blue crosswalk. People will park too close and you can't pass without going into the other lane.
So I know, again, winter conditions, you don't really want those bump outs, but that would be a place where I think those would be useful. If you just turn around from where you're standing right now, face the other direction.
I'm getting pretty good with this thing. There's the blue crosswalk.
And if that sign's right there, then you have to go around the sign because a car.
So right now, people park on the left side of that road. If you're looking at it here.
They park here?
Yeah. Yes. It's not formalized, but the yellow line is actually centered in the pavement. So once cars stack up on that side, you have one narrow lane and one wide lane. And it's just
Formalizing that through striping, I think, would be...
Are you suggesting people should park on both sides?
No, I think he's saying formalize on the left side.
Formalize the one side.
Okay.
I'm saying the road's wide enough where you could.
Lighting there,
do one.
nobody's ever stopped for me at that crosswalk.
Yeah.
They've never stopped for me. I stood there usually every Tuesday night, and nobody's ever stopped for me at that crosswalk. Maybe it's just me.
I think that's most crosswalks though, because like police will be sitting right here and they'll keep going.
Is that that's pretty heavily used though, right?
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
It's right
So
near
maybe a
the
signal?
senior center, the teen center,
Both.
and the school.
And the school, not too bad.
Both schools, right?
Lots of kids.
Middle, high school.
So can I ask a question on this? So in other towns, there's a little sign sometimes on the crosswalk, it's like a cone, it'll say, there's a fine if you don't stop for a pedestrian. How does that actually exist?
Like
It's
that one?
obviously not a state law.
It is.
It is a state law.
So is that actually says there, if you don't stop for pedestrian, there's...
I don't know if it says all that, but it's definitely there and in the road in the middle of the crosswalk.
No, I mean, so in Lunenburg, that's a law.
Technically, yeah.
It's a state law.
See, there we go. New York learns something every day. Okay.
But, I mean, I do hear, it certainly makes sense. There are situations that are unique, and I don't know if this is one of them, where it is sort of tough to pick up a pedestrian just because of whether it's vegetation or signage blocking out the person because you're standing outside. There are things that we've probably all run into where you realize at the last minute you're rolling to the crosswalk and someone was at the crosswalk and you go, oh man, I don't know why I didn't see that person, but generally speaking, the requirement is to stop and allow a person to cross the road. They have priority.
Once they step off the curb, you're out of luck. And you violate the law if you don't allow them.
Yep.
Once they step off the curb, so if they're waiting at the sidewalk, does the traffic have to stop?
No, you have to step off the curb.
Really? I didn't know that. I thought that they had to stop if you were waiting to cross.
No.
You could be waiting for a friend to pick you up. Once you initiate,
Once you put a foot in it. That's kind of scary. You have to be in the road.
Maybe that's why no one's
Don't put your best foot forward.
Well, the logic is that obviously there's not a car close enough to hurt you when you put your foot in the sidewalk. You know what I mean? And then, as you said, you have to prevent the problem of people just standing there and you don't stop. You're standing there waiting for...
It's sort of, I always stop. I honestly always stop. I assume they're going to cross the road, and I have had that happen though, where you stop and they go, oh.
Yeah, they wave you on.
Go ahead, right? Because they're not really intending to cross. But by and large, if someone's standing there, they're typically crossing the road. But that's something to note that there are things like lighting and signage and other aspects, vegetation, that can be improved to help those
They're
situations.
going like 40 or 50 too, at night in the dark. And usually, like I think you said, there's a car parked in it usually. And I think that really cuts back on people seeing people.
Right.
Or there's a van, I've had this happen, there's traffic right on either side of it, and you're standing there, people can't see you when you're trying to cross, they don't realize that you're between the cars.
Well, and that's, in this particular location, that's an issue because if people are parked in spots that aren't marked as parking spots, I don't know if you have a policy if there's not a striped spot, you're not supposed to be stopped in the right-of-way, and that's a whole other discussion. Like if people are parking there, are they allowed to park there, are they not allowed to park there, and I haven't looked closely enough at the situation, but these are opportunities, as we said earlier with the right-of-way. Someone questioned, and I mentioned that we have to work within the box that we have to work within for the most part, because typically you don't want to get into that conversation. No one ever wants to talk about taking someone's property for the purpose of a project. So if you have room to put parking there, it would achieve a lot of the principles if you need parking there, and that makes sense for the community. So those are the kinds of things that are, if you have an excessively large, I know subdivision rules and regulations for a period of time as subdivisions were developed for a number of things, and stormwater being a large portion of it, and that's not the topic we're here to necessarily discuss, but pavement just got wider and wider and wider and wider and wider, and the road lengths and everything. And now we're sort of reverting back to, we don't want that, because every little neighborhood had such wide open pavement that you had vehicles traveling at excessive speeds within the neighborhood, and now you've exposed the residents in the neighborhood to that kind of potential. So we've gone away from that, and we've gone backwards, and it's for a number of different reasons, but the traffic is one of them, and pedestrian movements is one of them. So narrowing the roads to something that's still a safe, back to the navigation by trucks and the ability to accommodate their turning radius and such. If the room is there and you need parking, then that's a great idea. That's just exactly the kind of thing we're looking for, because that might benefit the community as a whole.
And I've never seen the roads look like that. I don't know when they took that picture.
It's right when the block got painted.
On a roll, someone else go.
Bless you.
I just brought another one.
Go ahead, keep
We
throwing
have
out
our
there.
primary school K through 2. There's actually no pedestrian way to get to that school.
That's true.
I
Yeah.
feel like we might have heard that one before.
It would be really like an interesting concept if people could actually walk to the school, and it's actually impossible. There's not even a crosswalk from the school to the road.
So the school is down
Is there a
here
state grant for
Other way.
No, Matt, down
walkability
Matt
in schools?
It would be neat
I've
to-
suggested
if
they
those
apply
kids-
for them.
Follow Matt.
Yeah, keep going. It's pretty far.
The Lunenburg Primary School, and there's a puppet theater that is like
That's it,
basically
right.
probably
Keep going
on
down
the
that.
property.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Right at the end.
It's the Lunenburg Primary School.
Sorry.
Right here.
So there's a little puppet theater that's like right there, and they had to hire busing to bring the first graders to the puppet. It basically like almost abuts the school, and they hired busing because you can't leave that property on foot. So that would be cool. If
That is Mass Ave.
It's still a
but
super
it's
fast road, and I don't know if I'd want people taking, I don't know if I'd want like kids going out there on the sidewalk, but if it was wide enough or wide and it is a state road, but to have a school that you can't get to, you can barely get to by car too.
And I think
Or-
part of almost every community's Complete Streets program, by and large, and this is sort of a generalization, but by and large, most communities at some point tackle their state road main street, which largely they're state roads when there's a state road going through the center of their town a lot of times. Whether it's a TIP financing program or it's something that's been a municipal initiative, those are tackled at some point in time, and those are typically incorporate sidewalk improvements to get to some of the key elements in town, and those types of schools would be typically those sections would get picked up. So I think putting those on the list just keeps reinforcing that there's something that needs to happen downtown at some point in time, and if that's a MassDOT initiative or it's a municipal initiative with MassDOT's support, that's something that has to happen.
Where would be some connection points, like if you did have a sidewalk, like what?
All right, can I ask a question along that line?
Yeah.
So, as that is Mass Ave, it's a state road, who decides, or how do they decide when to start or stop sidewalking, if that's a word?
That's a good question, but I do not know the answer to.
Because the sidewalk stops, like, right in front of us. And I was just curious, why? My kids have to, not that it's difficult for us to walk out the backyard. When they walk out the front yard, there's actually a couple of kids that walk to school on Mass Ave, and it's kind of dicey.
I think now it comes with the design of the road. Your initial question, well, who decides where the sidewalks go and where they don't, or where they stop and they start? I can only compare it to our Summer Street project, where that's incorporated into the entire design of the roadway. So somewhere back,
A long time ago.
a long time ago,
Okay.
we got a sidewalk from the center of the town to the middle of the library on the other side of the street, and then a sidewalk down through the library, nothing further down. So I can't be 100% sure, but I would think that when the roadway was designed, that's when someone decided, or they were added after, and then the width of the topography caused it to end.
Sometimes it's simply reactive. At the time that the project's being done, folks want to go only to a certain point, and they include it. Sometimes it's economics. A lot of the disconnectivity that you see in communities is because there were no sidewalks at all, and so you say, well, the developer is doing a project, and so we can get him to put sidewalk up to a certain point, so we have something to connect to later. There's a reasonable negotiation that happens there, and you get little pieces of sidewalk. But by and large, some of the older infrastructure, like on a Mass Ave, really tough to tell who decided we're done with the sidewalk in front of, John's house or in front of 86, but it really shouldn't go up to 88. It's not an exact science.
When you look at that Main Street alignment, the slide that was there, you saw a sidewalk that goes up to the parking lot, ends. And then there's a whole stretch in front of the senior center that has no sidewalk. And then the sidewalk begins again and takes you down to the patios. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with the patios, but in order to connect whatever is there to the center, you could just connect the dots between that Memorial Drive sidewalk and the Memorial Drive past the gate. That's a project.
Yeah, that's probably right now because there's not a lot of through traffic on Memorial Drive, but just that area between the school campus, the center of town, the senior center, the teen center, the playground, the parks that are there's probably the most enjoyable place to walk in the center of town right now. And to make that, the intersection we're talking about, the sidewalk Jack's talking about, that's, to me, really the nicest area is walk in the center of town. And to enhance that, build upon that, build out from there, would only make things better for us.
We're hearing all of the same kind of general things that we heard when we met with staff. I think
you're going to take that board with you, Mary?
We're going to take really close pictures. A little further out of town, the other direction, and when you said the school, it made me think of what I heard. I think there's a daycare center the other direction, and it sounds like there's a whole bunch of kids that come trotting up on no sidewalk and go up Mass Ave and go to maybe the library or to the park.
That was an interesting thing too about the baseball field. There's no sidewalk
on the main
entrance to that too. Like the main.
Yeah, the Mass Ave side, there's no sidewalk.
But it's on the other side.
With no crosswalk to it.
On the other side.
And then you do have the Bonjour and then St. Boniface.
St. Boniface has a
Lots of
sidewalk on the
children
opposite
on
side.
that.
Right, so you have really a core area where you have a lot of young...
A lot of children with...
Sidewalk jump the street though, it goes like some side, it goes to the other side, it comes to this side.
I've never walked it.
Yeah, I've walked it. It's weird. You can't keep going. You have to keep crossing the street.
Yeah, and then we heard that. It's kind of like playing Jenga with a side, you just here and then you move over there and you cut back across. It's a zigzag scenario.
There's the Bonjour School in St. Boniface.
St. Boniface has sidewalk across the street.
Across the street.
Correct, but
Okay.
Bonjour has, it's probably close to a quarter mile before they hit the sidewalk.
And there's St. Boniface, right?
Yeah, Bonjour is at the end of Chestnut.
On the other side where we were the last time.
Like right near Conrad or somewhere.
Oh, this is
Go west. Right on that corner.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right there.
Right there.
That intersection's bad enough.
Oh, horrible.
I drop my daughter off there twice a week and it's constantly peeling out of there to not get hit by a car.
Nice place for the pole, huh?
Yeah, that's great.
What intersection is that?
Maybe we could remove that pole.
Chestnut.
Yeah.
Okay.
It slows people down pulling in. This is one of those safety improvements.
Visual deterrent.
But that's not, walking in the shoulder is not a great plan for a bunch of preschoolers or anyone for that matter, any resident. That's not optimal by any stretch.
Is there sidewalk to the Stone Farm development?
I think that's where it ends.
No, just to point out how some things cost no money at all. That corner, when they moved into Bonjour, I called the Department of Transportation, and they were kind enough to come out and remove all that vegetation, so it opened up that whole corner to make it a little safer. It's probably time to do it again, actually. But they didn't charge us anything for that. So there are little things that we can do like that, and that we do to try to
keep it safe for the folks.
Make things safer.
I think, vegetation, I mean, those are all sort of maintenance things, and when it's a state roadway, it's sort of incumbent on knowing what the budget issue is at the state level and at the municipal level too. Calling them out and asking them to come out and address their issue is not a bad thing.
Chief, is that one of those areas under the new state bylaws that we accepted where you could reduce the speed on Mass Ave because it's a daycare?
No, because it's a state, well, we could do it, but the state would have to approve it.
Yeah, but we can petition the state now.
We could.
Yeah.
Yeah, and make it a safety zone?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's, even no matter what you do, it's still a blind corner, people still go fast there.
That's right.
And that's without the need for a speed study, correct?
Yes, we have to.
You have to go through all the steps.
They may require us to do a study and submit it to them. Well, they will, and then we'll have to submit it to them. That's something we should probably talk to them about.
I just always know that speed studies become a dicey sort of...
Speed, well, that's a whole different... Yeah, under this new law, it'd be a little easier, but we still have to submit a study.
Okay.
Then there's an unutilized parking lot right in the town center that we could refurbish right behind Ritter by the Historical Society. It's probably like 50 spots.
Okay.
40 spots.
Behind Ritter, you said?
I'm not that cheap.
Just if it was lined, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, the pavement's pretty tough shape.
Pretty paved.
Yeah, I don't think you could.
You could probably
40
get away with a
generous.
leveling course. I don't know what the substructure
Got that green eye.
is like. She's talking about the primary school.
So this is a pretty good list of projects, I would say. We came up with quite a lot. Scott was just going to pull up the list that some of the town staff have put together just so you could see. It's not every single thing that they discussed, but it's a list that they did compile, and it is pretty similar to what we just discussed this evening.
Just wondering if I could find the parking lot where we...
South.
School Street.
Oh. Okay. I thought you said...
No, bottom left.
Street.
Right there.
Right there.
Oh, okay.
So we're sometimes short on parking for bigger events than there is parking lot there.
That's why the new CVS is the one.
So it could be less than 5,000 square feet.
So this is the list that some of the town staff have put together. Again, it's not every single thing that was discussed by any means. It's just a quick summary. But you'll see
And if I click on this, it's going to disappear and go back to the beginning, right? No. I'm going to risk it. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. All right, bear with me at home while I just try to get to slide 17. Which I think is slide 17. Yep. So we had a whole bunch of them, so we sort of generalized in the village area, and I think we heard some of that, but Whalum Road, that general corridor of Whalum Road, based on number of residents in that area and the attraction to get to places in that area. Summer Street, which was mentioned, I think was mentioned earlier. Lancaster Avenue, Goodrich Street intersection, so that's one of those intersections where folks get a little, it's not a 90-degree intersection, there's some sight distance issues, there's some conflicts with, I believe that's one of the...
That's what we're looking at the beacon, or some sort of flashing light.
Right.
Main Street and Oak, so this...
Oh yeah, right, Main Street and Oak, sidewalk connection, crosswalks, ramp sidewalk at Lancaster and between Mass Ave and Whiting, bike racks. No one mentioned bike racks, but bike racks are easy. It's a light lift. Folks maybe want to ride bikes to certain locations, but they don't have a place to put the bike. So perhaps that's something that's easy. The Bonjour School we just were talking about on Mass Ave, Reservoir Road. Then there are a number of other high-class locations, and then we've just listed ADA. There are probably plenty of areas around town, and we've talked about some specific locations where ADA access is limited or non-existent, so needs to be improved. That's a piece of the list. We have it's actually this probably is 20 or 30 projects long when you dive into some of those broader categories with specificity. We can put that comprehensive list out as part of correspondence to the community. We can post that list once we sort of develop that list along with what we've heard tonight.
Well, and the next step is to kind of start to prioritize things. So we have the list from the town staff, we have the list from this meeting, hopefully some ideas from you folks at home, and we'll compile it together and put together a survey, and would like to use that survey to help start to prioritize what are the projects that the community thinks is the most important. Certainly they're all important projects, but again, we can't fund everything, right? We don't have enough money to do everything, so if we need to pick and choose, how do we want to do that? You could look for a posting probably on the town's website and through other advertisement methods that Heather will probably post to find a survey that will be coming out probably in the next few weeks, I would say, that's going to have a list of the projects, have a list of the concepts, and ask, it won't be long, maybe 10 questions or so, to try to figure out how the community wants to prioritize these things. And then certainly you can contact myself, Scott. I don't know if you want to put up the slide with our contact information, Scott. You can contact us anytime, or Heather. Jack is a great resource as well, Adam, and certainly contact us anytime with any other questions.
I can't, since
they already went by it.
It isn't there.
Oh, it's not this one? And I think, this is a really great meeting. I think that we have a lot of great projects up here that I was really excited to hear so much feedback from everyone who attended this evening. And I know it's, Tuesday night in January, and everybody has a lot of different priorities and competing needs. So thank you very much for choosing to spend some of your evening here talking about this particular topic, Complete Streets. It's a really important topic. As the chief said, it's a nice opportunity to do some projects that the town is already planning on doing using another funding source, which is always nice. So it's a really great opportunity, and certainly, wouldn't be the project that it's going to be without folks attending meetings like these and with all of your input and ideas. So
yeah, I think it's important, just as you go leaving the meeting and sort of continuing to think about what we're trying to do here, just to share. I think one of the more important things when it comes to prioritizing the plan or developing the prioritization plan is we're not limiting the projects, but we are limited to what's going to be on the plan. We're not going to put 100 projects on the plan.
Right.
If we have 50 projects, it's going to be that much more difficult to prioritize them, I'm sure. But I think it's important to think about some smaller cost projects, then probably some larger projects, and I think also to have a mix of geographical location. I don't think we want every project on the prioritization list, around downtown. There are certainly some clear needs downtown, and we need to have those on the list. But there probably wants to be a geographical distribution around town if that's appropriate, so that things are more equally distributed on that initial prioritization. If you start to knock some of those projects off and the program stays robust and the town is committed, and over years you can easily start to pull back up into that list things that were off, or you can always go and grab one if it becomes a priority, because priorities change constantly in a community, and something could rise to the top.
So with the map of the state, what's the main reason a city or town doesn't participate in this program? What do they tell you?
It's a good question. I think there's probably a bunch of reasons why, maybe just there isn't a driver in town. They have an economic challenge or an opposition to, or they don't perceive it to be a problem. Perhaps their board is convinced it's not a problem, or they don't have someone sort of bringing it to their attention.
They might not know about the program.
Yeah, I think it's maybe just not understanding what the availability is or what the program's about. or just not having that as a priority in their philosophical priority.
Does anyone else have any other questions for us? Did we answer all of your questions?
Yes. This isn't a question, rather it's a statement. There's been numerous suggestions this evening about speed and that sort of thing, and I'd just like folks to understand, and they really do understand, but I want to bring it to the forefront again. You can only do so much with so many people. And our police force is statistically out of whack in terms of we need more people. It's a proven fact. They're doing the best they can. And I live on Highland Street, which is the main intersection, or the throughway, okay? So, and I understand, but I think that in the totality, we have to look at the protection of persons and property as well. So, thank you.
So I hope that, when you go home tonight, I hope that you feel like you've gotten a good understanding of what complete streets are. I hope we've been able to answer your questions. And again, we're very open to any additional feedback or questions or comments that you might have. Yes, sir.
Last question. What happens next?
We'll take the feedback. We'll take additional feedback that we hopefully receive from an open survey. Hopefully folks that couldn't make it tonight will throw in their input. We'll put it all into the blender and we'll take a look at what I just noted in the size of project, geographic, take a stab at an initial prioritization plan, and then we'll continue to work with public communication to try to prioritize it according to the town people's opinion. Obviously, Jack and Heather, Board of Selectmen, Police Chief, everybody's input, and then we'll propose something as a draft. And we'll have a conversation about it. And when everybody's satisfied, we'll finalize it. The deliverable will look like a spreadsheet. Will cost those projects out in a general fashion. So we'll have a list of projects, an estimated cost of those projects, and that'll be the product that goes into MassDOT. When they approve that, then you change tiers. You become eligible for funding.
So can you put a timeline against all that?
What's that?
You put a timeline against all that?
Yeah, I think we're done no later than, is it, Heather, May? May, June?
Yeah. So it's submitted DOT by June?
I have the very latest. Yeah, I hope earlier if possible.
So when would we start to see some of these done? Actually see the work being done?
Once the prioritization plan is complete, what that does is make Lunenburg eligible to apply for future DOT funding rounds. So it'll depend when DOT has the next funding round and they're accepting applications from communities. And then at that point in time, it'll probably be at least 2019, I would say. If DOT does another funding round, it'll be probably at least 2019 that Lunenburg would be eligible to then apply.
When there's a design piece that has to happen, these aren't designed at that point, so you need to go through a design process, and then you can apply for the funding for construction.
Oh, you're going to be out of college, basically.
It's construction funding.
So the design funding, the town has to pay for the design funding? So similar to the TIP?
Yeah.
But in some of these projects don't require design. So for example, a radar sign for our speed limit sign for the police department, or wayfinding signs for bicycles or things like that. Not everything would need to be designed. You can have some smaller dollar value projects up here, that are $2,000, $1,500, that, are good projects to put up there and complete and show progress with your Complete Streets initiative, that aren't those big, huge construction design projects. So it's nice to have a range.
And will your cost estimates break out design versus the project cost?
Yeah, we'll carry a cost. We can have a column for design. I mean, they're looking at a cost really from the program perspective. They want to know what the construction is, because at that point, that's when they jump in and say we're contributing some portion of up to $400,000 to the project.
But so they know the design.
Yeah, no, understood. Yeah, absolutely. And as Mary said, there are some that are going to be a little more involved in. The level of estimate for design will be estimate of construction cost, and then there'll be a percentage applied to that. And then if, we get to that point, then we'll get more detailed on what the cost is of those designs. Some are obviously more than others.
I have a question about the striping projects. How long do those last? I mean, when do you have to do the whole thing all over again?
It's variable. I mean, you have striping that probably was done 10 years ago or longer on roads in town. It depends on whether it's paint or whether it's thermoplastic. There are different types of striping, and so some have different life expectancies depending on the amount of traffic that travels on the road and the weather conditions and how much plowing you have to do. And so in every environment it's a little bit different, but by and large, you don't stripe those all that frequently. How often do you restripe, Jack, on your road?
About every year and a half.
Do you do every year and a half with regular paint?
Right.
Not, okay. So it's a touch-up. It doesn't disappear completely, but when you put it, right, it's just clarifying it for traffic travel. But you can put thermoplastic down, and it's a different type, but the plows do a number on that typically too.
So those don't really last very long. You have to redo the striping.
You touch them up, but the primary application on a new pavement job, you have to clear it up every so often to touch it up to keep it looking crisp and visible to the driver. But it would stay there without you touching it. You'd still be able to see it for many years.
So you have to add that to the maintenance, really.
It's ongoing roadway maintenance. Yep.
So the more striping things you do, the more it's going to
the more maintenance you have, sure. And I think the more lanes you have, you stripe a bike lane, you have more striping on the roadway. Clearly, it does add to the annual obligation that you might have to allocate for in your budgeting. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Scott and Mary, say that we're looking forward to working with them through the next steps and towards a final product. We have 2 quick business items to do, and then we'll take public comment and adjourn. I have warrants, an accounts payable warrant in the amount of $546,642.78. A payroll warrant in the amount of $767,866.31. And an accounts payable warrant in the amount of $233,955.56. We have no minutes this evening. Are there any action file issues? Do you have any public comment from the public?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I had occasion yesterday to drop some stuff off at the Passio School, and I came across an old friend of mine, Bob Jokla, who's the business manager for the Fitchburg school system. And he couldn't say enough good things about the cooperation that the town of Lunenburg and the school department and everybody involved in that whole process. He just couldn't say enough good things. So I think it's very important to make sure that the good folks of Lunenburg understand that we're good neighbors and we come through when we need it. And that's very much appreciated from the folks in Fitchburg. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment from the board? Okay, our next meeting is January 16th, and we have a meeting on January 23rd. There are final 2 meetings in January. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Good night, everybody. Thank you.